Hi there, we're going to take you to a little journey through the process of making clay tile and burying them back into the ground again. The first process was to go back into the pits and mine the clay, and we loaded them onto a dump truck or dump trucks, as the case may be, and then we take those loads and we pile them, as you'll see in just a second. And we made large piles so we would get a good mix of product from various parts of the clay pits in order to have a better quality clay. Our operator there is Morian, dear man who worked for us for many years, from Poland. There he is, smiling as he goes. As you can see, they're old Rio trucks. We had many of those. Take them off the road and then would finish off their lives back in the clay pit. The plant was not far away. There was not a lot of hauling. And this time, way back in 1959, as you see here in the distance, is the plant itself. Take the journey down the path. And here we go, and we go back up onto the pile there in just a minute. Also, this was back when we certainly did have loaders and bulldozers and so on, but this particular time there's this gentleman back there, a senior man, and he enjoyed this job of making sure that the trucks parked at the right place and dumped the product in the right way, and he took care of it as his own little jewel, own little business. There's Norman, dear Norman. The product then is moved, and we go through this process. Here comes a front end loader. It's called a scoop mobile, and it did scoop tons and tons and tons of material for us. There comes Reinhard, and he also did this for many years. He worked for about 30 years for us at the plant. The clay then, as you will see, he brings it into the building. Off to the right in that building is another clay pile inside, which was used then for winter manufacturing, because in inclement weather we couldn't take it from outside. So up the hill he comes, and up into a two-story building. And the first process is he dumps the clay into a feeder. We call them puck mills, a feeder mill. And the clay is pucked or worked with knives. And as you can see, the clay coming and falling down an opening, a hole in the floor, and then down under these was the first set of crushers, and he crushed the product into the second crusher. The first one was to take the small stones and grind them to pieces, and the next one was a smooth roll, and then it fell into this transfer puck mill, one way and one the other way to the other machine. We had two extruders operating at the same time. Then the clay falls into the extruder, and there it's worked again. The more that clay was worked, the better the quality, the plasticity of it. It was like kneading dough, making bread. It was then augered into a vacuum chamber, and the vacuum chamber prepared the clay for even a better product. And then it was extruded as it came out like a long pipe, a long sausage, onto a cutter, a reel cutter. And as you can see, those arms, they're over a foot long, and music wire on them and cut them off. Thousands and thousands and millions of them. Day by day it would do this. And at that time, at the end of this cutter, there's a man, and he works very, very hard to get those tile out of the way. And then there were two men, and they loaded the racks, the dryer racks we call them. And they would fill this one on that side, and then they would move over to the other side on a wing and load these. From here, they would go off into the dryer, as you will just see in a second. There were around 300 to 400 of those 4-inch pipe on one rack. The little unit that transferred them was an electric unit, which was a very new concept back in the 50s. It was clean and no emission problems and so on. And then now you can see the dryer. They're set in there, they're wet here, just manufactured, and now we have to dry them very, very carefully. And there you can see the holes in the floor where the heat came into the dryer and up through the product, and we would draw heat from the ovens when the ovens were finished and draw it into the dryer. And now when they were dry, the next process is, here comes a man with a little unit called a truckman. This was a bit more noisy and a bit more stinky, had a little Wisconsin engine on. You had to pump it up by hand, hydraulically, and put the thing in reverse, and away we went. And he's transferring the product from the drying room into the oven itself. And at the oven, there were men, they unloaded the product and stacked it into the oven, into the kiln, where it would be burned then, as soon as it was filled and the door was closed. There you can see, usually 6 men, and they would take that product and lift it right up. We would stack them 12, 13 tile high. And they were all stacked on end, placed neatly so that the heat, as it was fired, would come up to the very top of the beehive and would fall down through the product and burn the product from top to bottom. And here you can see they're hoisting in great big 14-inch tile. Product when the oven was filled, and then we would brick up the door. Years ago they would call that the wicket. And when everything was put in place, all the little corners was filled, they would mix up some mud, clay mud, and plaster the doorway. And that would be sufficient for it to burn the product. On the other side of those brick, it would have reach temperatures of 1900 degrees Fahrenheit. So that door had to be sealed very well, very secure, and then to be ready for, there it is, a finished product of the doorway. Now, in 1959, we turned from burning wood, to burning propane and butane. And there you can see that the burner was lit. And this was a real advancement back in 1959 to burn with a product such as gas, natural gas, or propane or butane, rather than coal and wood, etc. The burning process was, you'd start off very slowly not to heat the product too quickly to avoid them blowing up, exploding or imploding or whatever, and so you had to go very, very gently as the heat rose up to 1800 degrees. There was our storage tanks. We had 10 of them, and it used a lot of propane, a lot of butane for one burn, or for five of those ovens every week. So you can imagine the amount of propane that we used at that time. There we come back to the burner. It's now red hot, and it would take from 60 to 70 hours to finish a burn. Now we're back in the process of taking them back out. They're orange or buff in color, and back in those days it was all handled and loaded onto those little wheelbarrows, and the wheelbarrows out onto the trucks, to the trailers to unload them, and that was Amos and the truck drivers. And it would take sometimes a day or part of a day to unload a big kiln. It depended how many men were at it. You can see that they're working from both sides. And it was very efficient for back in those days. It was one of our big Rio trucks. Now we're going to take you further journey, another step. The truck is loaded, and we're now going off into the field. And that is, the plant was at Wallenstein, and there's old 86 highway, and he's going to take it up on a farm not too many miles away, and we'll show you in a few minutes how that they were unloaded then and strung out in rows in the field, and then the machinery would come to put it into the ground. There we are. Now we've got the crew going, and this is what we call stringing out the tile. Taking those tile and putting them on a chute, and the tractor would drive slowly along. They were, as we had mentioned earlier, they were only a foot long, and so once the trencher came along, he would drive along beside the rows of tile and would put them into the ground. Here they're just starting in, and the man has to finish off the bottom of the trench, and then we'll show you how that they put them right into the ground. There he's making a connection, and the operator is getting the machine ready to travel. In this particular case it was rather stony, and it was a little bit more of a process. There he's chipping away at the product to make his joint and get all the tile placed in place. He places tile by tile right into the back of the machine, and then it covers it over with spading in, we called it, and then the man that puts them in place has there you go. He's got a hook, puts it in place, makes sure that they're at the right spacings. There is Ab Fry. He's enjoying his machine, and we got Elmer laying the tile. Generally these tile were put in spacings of 60 feet apart. Every 60 feet there would be a tile drain, and the drain would go down into a main drain which would lead off to an open ditch. And here we have another machine on the job as well, and we would work together farm to farm to bury this product. It would prepare, it would take the water away for good drainage so that the crops can grow, and the soil would be conditioned so not to become sour and cold and so on. And so that drainage is such a big thing, still is today, has been for many years, but it just automated into new ways of doing it. There you can see the man hooking them in again. This was my machine. It was a spiker machine. It was on rubber. That was a new thing too back in those years. To get away from the tracks onto rubber, and it was a beautiful machine for those days. So there we've taken you to the journey of from earth to earth, making tile from out of the ground, putting them back in